before we go into the core of our conversation this afternoon, can you please provide a picture or a status update of the capital markets, and precisely what are the key features that you see today that define the capital markets in Nigeria?
Thank you very much, Frank, and thank you for having me on this webinar. From the introductory comments you made, I think you sort of, dimension the role of markets in an ecosystem or in a country. Where Nigeria is today, I dare say that to all the challenges or conversation we might be having, the most important segment of this ecosystem, of this, country called Nigeria, is capital markets. And the earlier we understand that we can solve most of our issues, and they're not major, so I'll call them challenges, through the market. The earlier we understand that, the better for how we're going to take this country to the next level. If you look at it, the finances, government finances cannot deliver on almost all the matters that should be of major concern to us in this country today. If we start from infrastructure, let's only leave the hard infrastructure and go to broadband. This has to be private sector led. If you look at the gaps in education, in health, roads, power, railway, and you know how important the transportation system is to the development of any economy and economic growth and activities, you will appreciate the fact that capital markets, the markets will play a major role. I read the treatise from the central bank governor on the COVID-19 tragedy to opportunity. If you look at the goals, what we want to achieve, take control of our economy, take control of our destiny, take control of our future, and you look at the sub-objectives of health, quality, health, care, education, food security, power, infrastructure, the markets would have to be the major conversation. You saw the Infraco PLC of 15 trillion naira. That sounds like a lot of money, but this economy can deliver that. And what we need is actually to fix the DNA, what I call the DNA of this country in terms of the philosophy. What sort of philosophy do we have? If we're going to approach things from market perspective, then the architecture would have to support that. The strategy would have to support that. Of course, leadership is important, but without the DNA and us agreeing and codifying that DNA, we may be having this, stop, we'll achieve 2 steps and take 4 backwards and things like that. But to answer you in very simple words, the capital market is very, very crucial at this point in this country.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, I think it's fair that we do establish the critical nature of importance of the capital markets, and how it is that you don't wait until you have solved all the problems before you start talking about capital markets. In fact, capital markets are part of the solution of the problems, virtually all the problems that we confront as a nation today. So how does a country like Nigeria take opportunity of the challenges that we have today to develop its capital markets and really create that bastion, that pillar that every thriving economy needs?
Very good point. Let us look at what we have in place and what we need to put in place. And I'll take the first box, and the first box will be infrastructure for me. Today we have the Nigerian Stock Exchange, we have the FMDQ Securities Exchange, we have the clearing houses, FMDQ Clear, we have the depositories. All this will go into what you call your financial market infrastructure. The regulator has registered some of these entities. We have the CSCS, we also have the FMDQ depository. So in terms of the infrastructure required as the pillar of what you're asking for, that is in place. We have very brilliant minds. We have top practitioners in this country. Some of them, they've always worked where, some have worked in the US and they're back here. We have Oscar Oyema, we have Agboje Mokwede. We have the capital market is, we have solid people here. We have people in CSCS and other places. We have some brilliant minds in FMDQ as well. So in terms of people, the stockbrokers, the trustees, the lawyers, the legal practitioners, all of them. Olaniwa Ajayi, Banwa Nigodalo, UUPO, the list is endless. We've got all these lawyers. Then we go to the investment bankers, the Bolaji Baloguns of this world, Kyle Akik, a long list of them, Tayo, okay, well, we have the people in the market, Kyle they follow. So again, if you look at that box of after the infrastructure, the people to drive the business, we have all these people, of course, taking over from our seniors in the past, the Mr. Peter side, Wale Edun, and co. And also the entrepreneurs in banking, Mr. Ovia, Mr. Adiola. Again, the second pillar of people we have. What we need the legal framework, the regulatory framework. Again, don't get me wrong, we've got the brilliant regulators, but in the absence of the legal framework, so many other laws that we require, Nigeria is going to be slow in taking off. And without this legal framework, the required liquidity and the quality of participants we're looking for will not occur, because when outsiders look into the country and they engage the investment bankers and the lawyers, the first thing they ask for is law. The next thing is regulation. What sort of regulation do we have in place? Again, there must be perfect alignment between, you remember I spoke to the DNA box, there must be perfect alignment between your philosophy and your regulation. If you're driving a market-driven economy, then regulation cannot be restricted. You cannot have administrative rules. So they have to align, and that is how the wheel will start. So if you ask me in terms of global competitiveness, and you look at the pillars, the stakeholders are there. We've got, everybody we need in this country. We have the entrepreneurs, Alhaji Dangote, we have the Tony Lumelus, we have all these people in place. But all of them, all the senior bankers in the country and the bank CEOs. We have the seasoned regulators. We have the we have the financial market infrastructure, the depository, the clearinghouse, the exchanges. They're all in place. You have FX, the commodity exchange in Abuja. We need laws, and we need government. We need regulation. Whilst government is small in terms of the percentage of our GDP of the expenditure, we have to recognize that if government does not put some rules in place or enable or open the economy, we may not be able to get to the promised land. Government is so critical, and I think our global competitiveness, if you ask me, over 5, I think the score is still low. And as you said, going back to your first question, the earlier government sits with the capital markets, and the government will say, where do we need alignment? What do we need to do so the markets can drive? Look, the total bond market, non-sovereign in this country, is less than 1 trillion. But if you look at the pension funds, the figures are rising every day, because every month, COVID or no COVID, we're sending money to the pension fund administrators. Now, if you have the right philosophy, you've got to ask the question, the pension that we're all piling up, at what level is it being invested? And is it above inflation? Because this is money that will come in future. So we can't just, sit and be throwing things up. We need to say, what is our philosophy? When we answer the question on our philosophy, and we all agree that this is the philosophy of this country, then we'll be able to write rules. PENCOM will know what is going to approve for the PFAs. Somebody in this country must be interested in the real return on our pensions. We don't inflation cannot be 12, and the pension can only invest in assets that are bringing 6 or 7%. This is dangerous for the future. So if you ask me again, looking at what we need to tap into the numerous opportunities in this country, a simple alignment of our philosophy with regulation and also legal framework to underpin the success that we require. But those things are not as easy as said, because everybody, all the stakeholders, from the leadership of the country down to civil servants, everybody must be in sync. If we don't achieve that sort of perfect harmony, we're going to struggle for long.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. You know, as a journalist, I tend to meet people from both government and the private sector. And I can tell you, I mean, I have done this over a good number of years. What I find common is that people in government want to see progress in Nigeria. Those in the private sector also want to see progress in Nigeria. Truth is, the private sector people might be a little bit more patient. They probably want things to go faster. My sense is that both parties have an identified common destination. How do we begin to create the kind of alignment between private sector and government in relation to the capital markets, that we understand, firstly, that the global economy is moving and it is not waiting for Nigeria. Secondly, that our own economy, to a good extent, is plugged to this global economy that is moving, and leaders of businesses in Nigeria want to run as fast as their peers elsewhere are running. They want to be able to access capital markets as quickly, cleanly as their peers elsewhere are running. Because in the end, the dollar is dollar. You know, I mean, in the end, you have a basic way of valuation. And so you are struggling against people wherever it is that they are in the world, but you are looking at the same kind of numbers. So you talked about pension, for instance. How do you invest the bulk of the pension in assets that generate 6% when you are dealing with inflation at multiples of that? So that's my dilemma, and I'm sure that is yours as well. But how do we get this conversation to lead into the point that not only is it that we identify a common destination, that we are actually walking lockstep and barrel together, private sector and public sector, to ensure that we do this in good pace and run?
Thank you, Frank. This is a conversation that can take us hours, but I'll try and see if I can distill this in two big boxes. The first box, as I told you, is that DNA. Okay, what is the philosophy? Where is leadership? What is the strategy? And then you look at architecture. Once you get this four codified, then leadership will drive that alignment. The leadership sits with markets and sits with the other stakeholders and would sort of tell everybody, challenge everybody, and say this is the direction. So there's mindset. The people in government would have to understand that there's no attempt by the private sector to take over some quote unquote power from them. They are the ones in power and they are in control. But in terms of how the market will support, I think they have to concede and allow the market to give a template of what is required from government to support, and for them not to doubt that oh, maybe there's some ulterior motive. If we speak with government and we say we want you to privatize this, we want you to give us a law that ensures that we can have netting, we can have, you operate central counterparty clearing, we can have netting of checks, we can do all these things. We're saying these things for the economy and for all the stakeholders. So if I look at the capital markets today, how can we support the SMEs? So are the sort of conversations we should be having. And once we give a template to government and say these are the requirements, look, our friends Jayola and the NESG, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, over the years, some of our seniors and big uncles, Pastor Dozie, had led all this, and you're aware, the Kremer. These have been the conversation. And as you said, both parties will say we agree. But go back and test that alignment, and that's where we start falling short. But I think, I would say those two boxes are the philosophy and the architecture, and then you link this to the mindset. And for the parties to know, the private sector will be interested in what is the need for it, because it is when the private sector rolls that engine that capital comes in. As you said, look, when people have capital, whether Nigerians or foreigners, they think of growing their capital. So when people tell me about hot money, I say hot money doesn't just come from outside. Nigerians here as well will think of their wealth and think of the value of that wealth, and would never want that value to drop as much as possible, because they're operating as economic agents. So for me, I think the conversation happens all the time, but it is when we have to implement and the private sector says, look, this is a list of 20 things that have to be done by government. Then we need to ensure that the civil servants and the politicians are aligned. And where one party, because again, the politicians, even if they are aligned, they have to ensure that the civil service is ready, and nobody in civil service is saying, oh, must we do that? No, the country, the government must control all these things. I think we need to talk a bit about this, but permit me to say who has responsibility for it is the man with the initials PMB.
Thank you, sir. Now, I want us to look at, in the situation that the world finds itself, the importance of capital has become really at the very top. I was looking at the report on Bloomberg yesterday. Egypt, for instance, had the government, that is, created guarantees for small businesses to take credit from the bank to the tune of $12 billion. And they suddenly found that the pace at which the loans were being disbursed wasn't fast enough. And the government yesterday moved in to relax the conditions and to ensure that that pipeline wasn't dry, that it kept flowing, with cash for small businesses. Now, Nigeria is in a dire need to diversify its economy. The diversification of that economy cannot happen without significant amount of capital flows. What is the place of policy and the place of organizations, private sector organizations like yours, in ensuring that post-coronavirus pandemic, that this economy gets all the levers that it needs to run, and that businesses, have access to the capital that they need to recover from the pandemic and to begin to grow and grow very quickly?
Thank you, Frank. Again, the topic on diversification in Nigeria, I think I've been writing about that since I was an economics undergraduate in University of Ibadan. I'm not sure we're very sincere with diversification, because if we are, I think that's enough time I left that university about 34 years ago, or 35. And I'm sorry to say, leadership is so critical in that DNA box. And, you know, there was a time, I think 2015, 16, when crude was going down. Some of us were wishing it was going to stay single digit, quite honestly, because it appears Nigeria is waiting for a major fall before it decides to do. You know, no sooner this crude goes down, the diversification conversation is what you hear everywhere, then it starts going to 40, 50, and everybody walks away. It looks like it's just too simple. You know, the money comes in, and what's the point with going through this diversification again? We need a leader that's got that vision, and I think we have one in place now, that can see 40 years of Nigeria without crude oil and get all the brilliant minds to sit down, and we codify, if possible, legislate what we have to do. That there are brains in this country and we have the political will, we can do it. But I think oil is just cost us major problems. And because it doesn't stay down for so long to help us, you know, use our brains rather than what we can get from, you know, that oil, we quickly jettison whatever our agenda is and move on. You know, I read the piece from the central bank governor, and each time with my colleagues, we go back to that one pager. We've done a lot on COVID-19, tragedy to opportunity. If we're not careful, we're going to miss that opportunity again. So we looked at it in FMDQ and we said, okay, if in this economy as big as the Nigerian economy is, the total bond market is less than 1 trillion, then there's a problem somewhere.
Sure.
Are the private companies funding themselves? So we decided, approval of the board, to go into what we consider private capital. How would capital get to private companies? And most companies in Nigeria are private companies. Companies are going to lead infrastructure are going to be private companies. Companies are going to lead healthcare. They're going to do all these things. They're going to be private companies. How do we ensure they have access to this capital? The pension assets, the fund managers, the money's with them. How do we ensure that people, private companies can do that? We read the governor's piece. Again, it was filled with activities of private companies, agriculture, education. And we said, you know what? Maybe we have an exchange, but maybe what we need is a platform for private capital. And we've put one in place. And we're happy that, you know, our big brothers, Nigerian Stock Exchange, is also beginning to see that. Because they too, they've been in operations for 60 years. They've done a lot on the equity side, and they can see that the total market cap in that space is not even up to 15 trillion naira. So if you look at that, the equity market and the Nigerian economy, there's no super connection. The correlation must be very low. So we're so excited that both of us are going to be talking about private capital. But the central bank has opened the opportunities. But don't let us open the opportunities and not follow up with implementation. Right. Implementation is the most important thing. So if you ask what is FMDQ doing to support the post-COVID world, it is how to ensure we facilitate an easy, seamless, you know, way for people, private companies to tap the capital. And our vision is to be the private capital platform in this country leading in 2024, where they can talk to the transaction advisors very quickly. And there are other companies that are going to work and support them, because some small companies, and don't get it wrong, private companies are in 3 boxes: the small, the medium, and the big. There's some big companies. Right. Before MTN became PLC, it was a private company about 2-3 years ago. So all of them must be able to tap the asset management base of this country. The pension fund, the regulator has already approved and allowed private equity. Is the same way that people can do private debts. Private companies must be able to issue short-term paper, long-term paper. It's not only equity. At times, they don't even want to dilute. So what they're looking for. So those 2 platforms, if we've started as, we believe the Nigerian Stock Exchange will soon start, and then both of us working again together to sort of unleash the entrepreneurial energy of Nigerians. We get it wrong at times, thinking it's all banking sector. No, the pension fund, the insurance companies, the asset management firms, all sitting on, assets as well that can be deployed to support private capital. And that's
precisely
that we need to watch and support. And we believe that the regulators, those we've contacted, are supporting this already.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Before we round up, let's turn our attention to the foreign exchange market. What impact is it, in your view, will the current foreign exchange regime have on long-term capital formation and aggregation in Nigeria, given that that is very critical to borrowing as well?
The conversation on foreign exchange is very interesting, but the foreign exchange market is the nervous system So if you look at the human body and you appreciate what the role it plays, that is the foreign exchange for your capital market. And if you read some books, you will hear how the capital from Japan built homes for Americans.
Sure.
Because we put the right foreign exchange market in place, the right market structure, with the right regulation, capital, as you said earlier, all over the world will travel. Capital travels faster than human beings. And they're looking for opportunities and yield, and also looking for how to protect the yield. So you want a great debt market, the debt capital market, an equity market. The FX market must be world-class. It must be the most attractive. So when of going in and going out of your country, it must be seamless. You must give that sort of FX market. If you look at the commodity side, you need to do the same thing. If you look at housing, if we have mortgages in this country and we're able to securitize them, foreigners will buy foreign capital. They're looking for yields. As long as the yields are good and we can hedge. So again, one of the conversations in FMDQ, working with all the stakeholders, is risk management, derivatives. You must be able to hedge. If you anticipate a risk, you must be able to hedge. We've talked about the importance of the foreign exchange market so much without us getting it right. It's going to slow down FDI. It's going to slow down foreign direct investment, because people will say, I'm bringing $1 billion to Nigeria. I'm going to be here for 30, 40 years. That capital I want to ensure is not locked. So there's a lot of work to do. And again, to lead that conversation must be the central bank. And again, the central bank, what sort of FX market will support the sort of economy we want to build in the next 20, 30 years? We don't have to be the ones to do it, but we must codify it and nobody must deviate from it. The issue is, once there's little crisis, we tend to think we need to deviate from it. No, markets work stronger when the governance is high, when credibility is high. That will bring confidence, and on the back of this, you're going to have your liquidity. So again, simple terms, without an attractive FX market, we're going to have challenges for capital to pour into this country in the magnitude that it should. And there are too many opportunities here in Nigeria at the moment for us not to have dollars pouring into this country. There are just too many. But we're watching and we're aging and we're looking at this missed opportunity, and we hope that we can do something pretty fast.
Thank you so very much. In the mid-90s, there was the head of the IMF in Nigeria, Dr. Ishaq Hussein. And his theory then was that there was a positive correlation between oil price, global oil price, and seriousness of Nigerian government officials. That when the oil price is high, they never tend to be available for any meetings. But when the oil price goes down, they are the ones who knock on the doors of the World Bank and the IMF asking for meetings, so that oil price stay low for a very long period of time, so that our government officials can be a bit more realistic. But Coco, we must end this conversation here, given that we have to clear the way for our next session. I'd like to thank you so very much, not only for joining us, but for the work that you do both as a person and as head of FMDQ. I know we have traveled a number of times, met the same kind of investors, some of whom invest in Nigeria and have been here for 30 years, and we have together heard the comments that they make. But I like the hopeful note. We must believe that at some point that leaders will free themselves and just do the right thing, given the huge potential that is called Nigeria. Once again, I thank you so very much, and I wish you the very best, sir. And at this point, I'd like to hand over the microphone to my colleague, who will take us in a short interlude before our next conversation or the next session in our conversation will start. And I bet that we have provided some inspiration, and will continue to provide some inspiration for the next 2 days. Thank you once again, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you all. Cheers.